For centuries, we've been told the same story about ancient societies. Men led, women followed. But buried in North American history is a confederation of 6 nations that did something completely different. Something so radical that European colonizers were shocked by what they found and worked to erase it completely, because it challenges everything we think we know about how societies can work. They were known as the Haudenosaunee. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy flipped power structures completely upside down. 6 nations united under one system where women controlled the government. These weren't just advisory positions or ceremonial titles. Clan mothers held absolute political authority throughout the Confederation, making binding decisions about leadership, resources, and community direction. While European kings were worried about male heirs, the Haudenosaunee had already figured out that the women were the ones who should be making the important decisions. The selection process for male chiefs was rigorous and methodical. Clan mothers observed potential leaders for years, watching how candidates treated family members, handled disputes, and responded to stress. Think of it as the world's longest job interview, where your behavior at family dinners mattered more than your resume. Once chosen, these male leaders served entirely at the pleasure of the women who selected them. Women could remove chiefs instantly without complicated procedures or political battles. If a chief started acting like he owned the place, the clan mothers could fire him faster than a bad employee who showed up late one too many times. This removal power ensured that every major governmental decision required female approval before anything could happen. Military actions, trade agreements, territorial disputes, nothing moved forward without the clan mothers saying yes first. Every major decision needed a signature from the women first, like having your mom sign your permission slip before you could do anything important. The foundation for this female political control lay in how identity itself was determined. Matrilineal descent decided everything about social status, with your mother's clan determining your inheritance rights and future opportunities. This identity system gave women control over resource allocation across entire communities. When a clan mother said the corn was going to the Wolf Clan longhouse, that's where it went. Such comprehensive control worked because the system recognized different types of intelligence. Women excelled at long-term planning and community management, so the Haudenosaunee built their government around these strengths. Authority structures flowed downward from women to men in clear hierarchies. Male leaders gained their positions through female approval and kept them through continued female support. This accountability system prevented corruption and ensured leaders remained focused on community service rather than personal gain. This political foundation created something even more fundamental: complete control over daily life itself. Longhouses belonged entirely to women, extending their political authority into every aspect of domestic life. Individual women owned these massive buildings that housed entire extended families. Marriage fundamentally changed things for men, not women. A husband entered his wife's longhouse and lived under her family's rules. When a man got married, he basically moved from his mother's house to his wife's house, except now his mother-in-law was also his landlord. Women could end marriages by simply telling their husbands to leave. The man took his personal belongings and went back to his mother's or sister's longhouse. Everything else stayed put. Divorce meant the man packed his hunting gear and walked out the door. No lawyers, no splitting furniture, just grab your stuff and go. Property inheritance followed strict matrilineal rules. Cooking equipment, farming tools, stored food, clothing, all passed from mothers to daughters. Sons received nothing they could pass to their own children. Women managed all domestic economics within their longhouses. Managing a longhouse was like running a small town where everyone was related to you and had opinions about how you did everything. These economic responsibilities required managing complex family arrangements. Multiple generations of women shared space with their children, unmarried sons, and the men who had married into the family. Children gained their clan membership exclusively through maternal lines. A father might visit from the Bear Clan, but if mother belonged to the Deer Clan, the children were Deer Clan members for life. Senior women determined work assignments, resolved conflicts, and maintained relationships with other longhouses. Grandmothers controlled everything from daily chores to who their granddaughters could date. Imagine having your grandmother as both your boss and your dating advisor. The Longhouse served as an economic unit that extended beyond the family. Women organized craft production and created surplus goods for exchange with other communities. This security came from generations of accumulated wisdom about family dynamics and resource management. Women understood that stable homes created stable communities. This domestic control gave women the foundation they needed to wield a completely different kind of authority. Men specialized in external representation and physical protection, creating a complementary system to female domestic and political control. While women managed everything inside the community, men handled everything that involved traveling far from home and potentially getting into fights with strangers. Hunting represented one of the most important male responsibilities. Men left the longhouses for days or weeks to track game through the forests, bringing back meat, hides, and other resources that domestic production couldn't supply. Hunting was like being the community's grocery delivery service, except the groceries could run away, fight back, or simply hide where you couldn't find them. When conflicts arose, warfare required male leadership and coordination. Men organized defensive strategies and offensive campaigns when enemies threatened the community. They trained continuously for combat and maintained weapons and fortifications. These military skills translated directly into diplomatic responsibilities. Men traveled to other nations for treaty negotiations, trade discussions, and alliance building. Diplomacy meant convincing other tribes to cooperate instead of fight. Basically, sales meetings where failure could lead to actual arrows instead of just angry emails. The diplomatic role required specific speaking and ceremonial skills. Men delivered formal speeches, presented arguments, and conducted ceremonial functions as the public voice of decisions that women had made privately. This external focus extended to trade relationships. Men organized long-distance trading expeditions, negotiated exchange rates, and established commercial partnerships while women controlled internal resources and production. Men did all the traveling and negotiating while women stayed home and actually ran the business, like having permanent traveling salesmen working for female CEOs. Military expertise shaped how men approached strategic thinking. They planned battle formations, siege techniques, and defensive positions. They studied enemy capabilities and developed countermeasures for various threats. Sacred ceremonies included specific male roles that complemented female spiritual authority. Men conducted particular rituals, maintained ceremonial objects, and performed spiritual duties. Within their domains, male authority was real but clearly limited. Men made important decisions in areas like warfare, hunting, and diplomacy. Outside their expertise, they deferred to female judgment. This created mutual respect between genders rather than competition or resentment. This specialized power structure worked perfectly until someone had to figure out what everyone was going to eat. Women controlled the entire agricultural system that kept everyone alive. This represented perhaps their most fundamental power, since controlling food meant controlling survival itself. Women were the farmers, not the men. While other societies had men working the fields, the Haudenosaunee put women in charge of growing everything the community needed. In most places, men did the farming while women helped out. Here, women did the farming while men helped clear the land and then went hunting. Their farming expertise centered on the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash, grown together in carefully planned combinations. Women developed these sophisticated growing techniques over generations, maximizing both nutrition and soil health. These crops held sacred and symbolic meaning that reinforced female authority. The three sisters represented balance, cooperation, and survival. Women figured out that corn, beans, and squash grew better together than apart, kind of like how their own community worked better when everyone cooperated instead of competed. Land ownership flowed through maternal lines exclusively. Mothers passed farming rights to their daughters along with the knowledge of how to use those rights effectively. Male involvement in agriculture was deliberately limited to heavy clearing work. Men would cut down trees and remove rocks to prepare new fields, but once the land was ready for planting, the women took over completely. Men did the heavy lifting to clear the land, then women did the careful work of making things grow, like having construction workers prepare the foundation and then architects design the actual building. After harvest, Women decided how much food to store for winter, how much to share with other families, and how much to trade with neighboring communities. These weren't suggestions. These were binding decisions that affected everyone's survival. Food distribution required complex planning and management skills. Women calculated community needs for the entire winter, accounted for population changes, and maintained reserves for unexpected emergencies. Managing food for an entire community through winter was like planning meals for dozens of families while never knowing exactly how many people would show up for dinner. Agricultural control gave women tremendous economic power that extended far beyond their own communities. Since they controlled food production and distribution, they controlled the most valuable resource in their society. This food-based power shaped trade relationships with other tribes. Women determined what surplus crops could be exchanged, what prices to accept, and which trading partners to favor. The ability to feed the community translated directly into political influence over their own male leaders. Chiefs might make speeches and negotiate treaties, but if the women decided to withhold food support, those leaders would find their authority quickly undermined. Women's farming knowledge was considered specialized expertise that took years to master. They understood soil conditions, weather patterns, pest management, and crop rotation techniques developed over centuries. But this agricultural foundation would face serious challenges when outsiders arrived who had never heard of letting women run anything. European colonizers brought legal systems that excluded women from all political participation, directly attacking the foundation of Haudenosaunee society. They refused to acknowledge clan mothers as legitimate authorities and insisted on dealing only with male representatives. Europeans looked at a government run by women and decided it needed to be fixed by putting men in charge, like seeing a successful business and insisting it would work better if you fired half the management. Missionary education targeted traditional gender roles directly. Churches and schools taught Native children that women should remain silent in public affairs and submit to male authority in all matters. The missionaries were basically telling women who had been running entire nations that they needed to learn how to be quiet and follow orders from men. Colonial laws eliminated female property ownership. Longhouses that had belonged to women for generations became legal property of their husbands or male relatives under imposed regulations. Government structures were completely replaced. Colonial officials created new political systems that gave authority exclusively to men who would cooperate with European policies. The colonizers threw out a political system that had worked for centuries and replaced it with one where women had to ask men for permission to do anything, like replacing a working engine with a broken one because it looked more familiar. Cultural suppression accompanied these legal changes. Children were removed from their families and sent to boarding schools where they were punished for speaking their languages or practicing their customs. Two-spirit individuals faced criminalization and persecution. People who had held respected positions in their communities were forced to hide their identities or conform to European gender categories. Two-spirit people went from being respected community members to being told their very existence was illegal. Imagine being a doctor one day and a criminal the next just for being yourself. Economic systems shifted to individual male ownership. The communal resource management that women had controlled was replaced with private property that only men could legally possess. Marriage laws eliminated female autonomy. Traditional relationships where women controlled their partnerships were replaced with European-style marriages that gave men legal authority over their wives and children. Language suppression removed the vocabulary needed to describe traditional systems. When people lost the words for their social structures, they also lost the ability to think about alternatives. The transformation was systematic and thorough. The colonizers replaced centuries of successful governance with their own experimental systems that prioritized male authority. Multiple generations grew up under imposed structures. Traditional ways began to seem like ancient history rather than practical alternatives. The speed of this cultural transformation shocked even the colonizers who had planned it. But despite this comprehensive destruction, the story was far from over. Tribal communities today are actively restoring clan mother systems and matrilineal governance structures, deliberately rejecting imposed colonial systems. Communities are discovering that their traditional ways of organizing society actually work better than what replaced them. Like finding out your grandmother's old recipes were healthier and more delicious than anything you could buy in a store. Constitutional changes incorporate traditional gender roles into modern tribal governments. Some nations have rewritten their governing documents to include equal representation for women and two-spirit individuals in all decision-making processes. Modern tribal governments are writing new laws based on old wisdom, basically creating legal documents that would make their ancestors proud while still working within today's legal system. Language revitalization programs restore the vocabulary needed to understand traditional social structures. Cultural schools teach young people not just words, but the concepts behind them, including traditional ideas about gender, leadership, and community organization. Educational initiatives focus on traditional knowledge systems. Elders collaborate with younger generations to pass down information about how their societies functioned before colonization. Tribal elders are teaching young people how their ancestors organized their communities, like historians who lived through the events they're describing instead of just reading about them in books. Two-spirit individuals are reclaiming leadership positions in their communities. They're becoming cultural teachers, spiritual advisors, and political organizers, returning to roles their ancestors held with honor and respect. Two-spirit people are stepping back into leadership roles that their communities always had for them, like returning to jobs that were saved for them while they were away. Economic development projects incorporate traditional values. Some tribes are creating businesses and institutions that reflect traditional approaches to resource management and community ownership. Cultural ceremonies are being restored with traditional gender roles intact. Communities are reviving practices that recognize the spiritual and political authority of women and the complementary responsibilities of men. Legal advocacy efforts challenge imposed systems that conflict with traditional values. Tribal lawyers work to restore recognition of traditional marriage, property ownership, and governance systems within modern legal frameworks. Technology helps spread traditional knowledge across communities. Social media, online education, and digital archives allow people to share information about successful restoration efforts and coordinate similar projects. The movement adapts traditional principles to contemporary challenges rather than simply recreating the past. Communities apply traditional wisdom to modern problems and opportunities. Success varies between communities, but the overall trend continues toward greater recognition of traditional gender roles and governance systems. The Haudenosaunee example provides a powerful model for other indigenous communities seeking to restore their own traditional approaches to leadership and organization.